Tensions are running deep in Ukraine, even as Russia maintains it's not planning a Ukrainian invasion. Russia is carrying out area drills just 75 kilometers from the Ukrainian capital Kyiv. 2 Russian long-range strategic bombers took part in joint military exercises with Belarusian air forces. According to the Russian Ministry of Defense, the Russian strategic bombers conducted maneuvers for approximately 4 hours in Belarusian airspace. The mission came as the Kremlin moved troops from Siberia and the Far East to Belarus for sweeping joint drills. Satellite images taken on Friday show heavy Russian military deployments in southern Belarus, aircraft, troops and air defense systems at military bases in 3 towns. U.S. officials say Russia has put in place about 70% of combat power it believes Moscow would need for a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, and it's sending more battalion tactical groups to the border. In the last 2 weeks, the number of battalion tactical groups in the border region has risen to 83 from 60, and 14 more are in transit by Russian military units. Meanwhile, Ukraine received another consignment of weapons from the United States as part of defensive aid totaling $200 million. Washington has said it would continue to support Ukraine amid concerns over tens of thousands of Russian troops on its border. NATO's Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg has said that there had been a significant movement of Russian military forces into Ukraine's northern neighbor Belarus in recent days. The Kremlin describes it as a rehearsal for repelling external aggression. The Allied Resolve exercises will be running until February 20th. Moscow says its forces will withdraw after the drills. In support of NATO troops, U.S. soldiers landed at a military base in Germany. The troops are from the 18 Airborne Corps. And as NATO looks to reinforce its eastern flank, senior members of the U.S. military arrived in Poland. The military deployment is part of the Western allies' reaction to Russia's military presence near the Ukrainian border. On Wednesday, U.S. had announced the deployment of nearly 3,000 American troops to Eastern Europe in the coming days. Around 1,700 soldiers from the 82nd Airborne Division are due to be stationed in Poland on a temporary basis. The U.S. already has about 4,500 troops in Poland, in both a NATO and a bilateral capacity. Europe is scrambling to intercept the conflict. Ahead of traveling to Moscow and Kyiv, French President Emmanuel Macron spoke with NATO head Jens Stoltenberg about the Ukraine crisis. Macron also spoke with British Prime Minister Boris Johnson. With Stoltenberg, Macron insisted on finding a path to de-escalation through dialogue. The French leader will attempt to make progress on the issue during meetings with Vladimir Putin in Moscow on Monday, and with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in Kyiv on Tuesday. Civilian self-defense training also continued on the outskirts of Kyiv. Volunteers have joined former military personnel to learn how to handle weapons and administer first aid. Kyiv residents from diverse age groups came to the outskirts of the city to be trained in the basic knowledge of how to defend themselves. In the Ukrainian city of Kharkiv, thousands of people marched on Saturday. Ukrainians gathered to protest against any possible Russian invasion and to demonstrate unity with the rest of Ukraine. Kharkiv is just 40 kilometers from some of the tens of thousands of Russian troops massed at the border of Ukraine. If Russia invades, some of Kharkiv's over 1 million people say they stand ready to abandon their civilian lives. They will wage a guerrilla campaign against one of the world's greatest military powers. Well, for more updates on this, our executive editor Palki Sharma is joining us live from Ground Zero. Palki, good to see you and welcome to this broadcast. You are at the epicenter of the conflict. Yesterday you reported on the military presence in northern Ukraine. Belarus has consistently asserted its support for Ukraine, yet Russia continues to conduct joint military exercises with Belarusian air forces. Does this not further complicate the already volatile situation?
Of course it does. It is an extremely complicated situation. What makes it worse is the actions of the Russians and the words of the Americans. The American forecasts vis-a-vis this conflict are growing more dire by the day. Earlier in the week, the Americans said that the Russians will use a fake video of a Ukrainian attack as a pretext for a full-scale invasion. Today, as you told our viewers, the Americans say that a full-scale invasion is imminent, and that Russia has 70% of its military in place already deployed to launch such an invasion. And like you said, 83 battalion tactical groups are in place. 2 weeks back the number was 60. They're aiming to raise this from anywhere between 110 to 130 such groups. So the Russians, according to the American intelligence, are looking at deploying 150,000 troops around Ukraine to launch a full-scale invasion. What makes it even more concerning is the statement that has come from the chairman of the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Milley, who has said that in case of a full-scale invasion, the city of Kyiv, where I'm standing right now, will fall within 72 hours, and that there will be 50,000 civilian casualties. It is not clear how the Americans arrived at these estimates, but this is what they have been reporting. 72 hours is all it will take for the Russians to take Kyiv, the capital city of Ukraine, and it does sound very ominous. At the same time, the European leaders very much trying to find a way to resolve this crisis diplomatically. We know French President Emmanuel Macron has a busy week ahead. He's going to be traveling to Moscow on Monday and then to Kyiv on Tuesday, followed by the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, who's also expected to meet Russian President Vladimir Putin. So efforts are very much on to try and resolve it diplomatically, but the way things are going, the way both sides are ramping up their deployments, it could go either way, Eric.
Parky, you are now in Kyiv. Have you been able to interact with the local Ukrainians, and what's the mood on the ground?
The mood in the ground is that of tension. The mood on the ground is also that of a sense of betrayal, I would say. The Ukrainians feel that while their government is not adding to the war rhetoric, you would not have heard any statement from President Volodymyr Zelensky or his team on an imminent invasion from Russia. They very much want to resolve this diplomatically. At the same time, you showed our viewers images from Kyiv, which is a town which is barely 42 kilometers from the Russian border, and President Zelensky said that in case of an invasion, the city of Kyiv, the eastern industrial city, is at the risk of falling to the Russians. So those demonstrations are very much on. But the government here in Kyiv wants to avert a war, and the people of Kyiv and the people of Ukraine say that this does not help them, and that while the Western side, the Western allies are adding troops, are sending equipment, they may not really fight the war if it comes to that.
Parky, finally, why is it important for other countries in the European bloc to protect Ukraine and avert a possible war with Russia?
Well, because Ukraine is technically a part of Europe, and this would be the first such military conflict to take place in Europe post the Second World War. The second is that if an invasion does take place, Russia is going to be sanctioned most definitely. And when Russia is sanctioned, then that may hit gas supplies, because Europe also takes a very high position on saving democracies, on standing up for democracies. And if the European powers do not stand up for one of their own, a country like Ukraine, then it reflects very badly on them. So they will have to be party to some sort of sanctions, and that is very bad news for European business, especially bad news for European dependence on Russia for all their gas. So it is going to upset their economies, and it is going to cost a lot for leaders like Macron, for instance, who's going into an election later this year. He cannot afford another conflict which will increase the prices of gas. So it's linked to the economy, it's linked to their politics as well, the kind of positions they've taken. It's very important for Europe to try and avert this, not so much for the US, I would say.
Live from Kyiv, Ukraine, WION Executive Editor Parky Sharma, thank you very much for your insights and for talking to us today. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.